And one of the things I knew about Duncan was he didn't have this megalomaniacal reason to get into the demon realm. It wasn't, I just want to be evil and that's where all my power is, or blah, 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 blah. No. In fact, his family was stranded there, held by Lilith, and in return for his opening the gate, he was to be reunited with them. And so he spent a lot of his effort and time to get back to them. And when he finally made it into the demon realm, one of the side products of being in a place that has so much abundance of magic is that the mental stresses and the things that had ruined his mind started to get healed. And I think what really was interesting for him as a character was watching him come out of this mental fugue and starting to realize how far he had sunk in his quest to be reunited with his family. He had, essentially hit rock bottom, and, he was doing anything it took to get to them. Morality be damned, to some extent. And I think what was neat was to watch me, when I was thinking about him, was to write him almost like a sleeper waking up and finding out that there's so much more interesting things that are happening, in terms of his quest, and so many more pieces of that quest that needed to be figured out. And he wasn't even aware of them until he was faced with the impact of his decisions. And he wasn't able to face the impact of his decisions until essentially he woke up. He woke up and the healing of Arcadia allowed him to evaluate himself with, a view much like, someone suffering from an addiction might have to sober up before they can, figure out what they did. And so, Duncan is going through that process. And I found a lot of parallels and sort of I planned his sort of writing out along, not specifically rehabilitation, but I read a lot of stuff on how people go through their rehabilitation, the various steps they take, and I was able to map some of that process into his growth. And so what was really neat was watching him go through this process and, wake up in Arcadia to some extent, but really start to grow into his own. And, a small spoiler, but when he is, reunited with his family, watching him go from this mage who was causing thousands of deaths to trying to be a father to, his son, excuse me, trying to be a father to his son, he ended up, excuse me again, he ended up being, someone who had to really start focusing on what was important to him. And I think when you look at a character go through that arc, you see them hit their, whatever they're willing to do in order to move the ball forward for their own personal needs and gains. And then go through that moment where they realize they could be doing so much more. They could be such a better contributor to society. They can learn from their mistakes. This is where they become really like a good character to follow and to watch. They become someone who becomes really enjoyable. So I'm gonna stop there for a second and just focus on the fact that the question really was about how do you write someone like that. Well, and I do agree that the drama of that redemption, I think, is a great story. It's one of the classic stories of redemption, right? You are a bad guy who finds through effort and through salvation, goodness, and then you rise to a level above the lowest level you sank. You rise proportionally even higher in terms of being a force of positivity and of healing. And that's Duncan's arc. That's the arc that I had set out for him in the beginning. And the way I wrote about him was I had to take him down to the lowest part I could, the same way that, you know, any archetype of, quote, evil would be. And so it was actually sort of easy to do that because most characters in books are sort of one-dimensionally evil. Excuse me, sorry. And because of their one-dimensionality, they end up having this relatively single-mindedness around their own kind of loss of focus. I'm sorry, their hyper-focus gives them not a lot of breadth, a lot of sort of single-minded depth. Now, I'm not saying that an evil character I'm calling Duncan one-dimensional, but I don't mean it in terms of a flat way or in terms of a shallow way. What I mean is his mind was so fractured and so messed up that he was really focused on the end goal of being reunited with his family, and less so on the process of how that happened. So one of the things that when I wrote him was I sort of had a list on one side of all the things emotion-wise that he felt when I started. And that list was pretty small because I wanted to focus on some of the negative things that he was sort of focused on, the things that made him so... Following it... Sorry. There's something in the air here. It's making me... So, following the one sort of single track that he had to get together his family. Then on the flip side, when I had him come awakened, or you know, go through his awakening, there was this huge palette of emotions I could ascribe to him: regret, love, happiness for the first time in a long time, empathy. He had almost none before. And when you have that larger palette of emotions, your word choices increase, and your ability to write that character in a more satisfying way, a more fulfilling character, I think, really takes hold. And I think the positive feedback I've gotten on Duncan as a character in book 2 is that he's more well-rounded, that he's a better character, that he has more interesting tidbits about him, that he is fleshed out. And I don't think people would feel that way if they hadn't gone through his single-mindedness with me and with him until he sort of woke up and he found himself in Arcadia and he had a mission. And so, and that mission was not just reunite myself with my family, but be a good father, right? Be a good husband, be someone who the rest of the party, the team can count on. And while he may never win over Kisan, who has a single-mindedness of her own, in finding her lost apprentice, he does, to some extent, capture Sylvain's mercy. And I think it's because at one point in book 1, they have a moment of joining of minds where they share some memories. And I think that gave Sylvain insight into what really is happening behind this facade of, single-minded craziness that Duncan was exhibiting. And that's the kind of layers that you're going to see in most of the characters in my book, where they have a starting point, but their starting point is really a starting point. It's not their character, and they are going to grow, and they're going to change, and they're going to potentially become heroes or villains to you, the reader, based on what they experience. Sorry. Based on what they experience. And I think that that's the reason why I'm so excited to be sharing Mythborn with you guys. As I write Duncan more, and I think about where he's going, I realize that, and again, I don't want to give away too much, but he has a purpose now, and his purpose is so much more than just recovering his family. He is starting to realize that he has a higher calling, and the higher calling is to the people of Eden. And I think that he will become someone who we realize the end result of what happens in Mythborn can't happen without him as a catalyst. And I think that is going to be an interesting moment for everyone, in terms of the way in which he as a character grows. So next week, I think I want to talk a little bit about the magic system and about the fighting system of Mythborn. As many of you know, I'm a certified combat instructor. I have 30 years of training, and I'm a third-degree black belt in karate, or maybe fifth, I can't remember now. And I also know kendo, which is sword fighting, and grappling, ground fighting, a number of different things. I've had the pleasure of and the honor of training SWAT teams in Virginia, of training healthcare professionals based out of Howard University's medical school on how to deal with, not medical school, the actual hospital, on how to deal with PCP subjects and people who are under the influence. So how to incapacitate, control, manage people whose nervous systems might be either jacked up or who may not feel pain. Pain is a great deterrent when you have arm locks and wrist locks, but they don't work if someone doesn't feel it, right? There's no pain, they'll let you break the wrist. You need to come up with other methods to control them, and it's frightening how strong someone is when they don't feel pain, because pain is a general limiter of how much effort and force you'll put into something. But when you don't feel any pain, you're freakishly strong, and so we had to come up with 5-man teams to take every appendage in the head to put someone like that down. I want to get into some of the combat systems of Mythborn, how the monks fight, how the different guardsmen fight, the different houses, Galadine House, and the Tyr House. I know when you guys are reading, you'll read about the Flower Cut, and you'll read about the Mountain Stair and other things like that. Go into some of those philosophies in sword fighting, where it's about seeing the big picture, it's about understanding how things sort of work, and trying to encapsulate and then absorb the minutia of movement that decides where your blade needs to be in order to have an advantage in a exchange where a mistake is fatal. So that's going to be an interesting conversation to have. I hope you guys can join me for it. I also I'm hoping next week to do 2 of these. So I'm hoping I'll have one on Tuesday at 3 p.m. and on Thursday at 3 p.m. So look for potentially slightly shorter ones. I've been going on average about 20, 21 minutes on these, but I think I might do 2 10-minute ones or maybe 2 15-minute ones and try and hit more subjects and, get some cool content out there. I also want to talk about things that are just interesting in general. Science concepts, cryptids and creatures that influence Mythborn, games I'm playing right now and games I want to play, and how those games are going to influence Mythborn, the video game, and how much that is an interesting area to talk about. I also want to get your guys' comments. I've been getting so many comments from people that I want to have another forum, another day that I can answer some of these questions, or I want to try and get to more questions so that I can, give people more feedback on stuff. So I'm pretty excited about that. Still working hard on book 4. Did some writing today, and very, very exciting to watch some of the prehistory of Alien Deft and the search for the Phoenix, and just how all that started off. So much is happening in the first couple of books. And also I've been starting on the outline for the next series, based in the same world, tentatively called Techborn. And as you know, the technology of Mythborn is nanotechnology. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, as Arthur C. Clarke said. And Mythborn is based in a world of magic, but that magic has a background in science. And I wanted to do another series, a 5-book series, that took us into that world and what's happening, above the atmosphere of Eden, and what is the world in which, what is the galaxy in which Eden finds itself a world. You know, and exactly what happens if a technician from that galactic, you know, I think I'm right now tentatively calling it the Terran Economic Commonwealth. What happens if one of the tech guys ends up coming to Eden to find out what happened to that ancient terraforming operation, and why is Eden offline? So look forward to some really fun things there. Hey, I hope I see you guys at Baltimore Comic-Con. Thank you for tuning in. I apologize for some of the weirdness in the early parts of the video with it being sideways. We might try and edit it out, or I might just leave it in because it's natural, it's real, and frankly, you know, as fans, I think, you know, the fun part is talking to you. I think you can ignore the first minute or so of me being sideways. And also, you know, I don't know what was going on today with the air, but I found myself just sneezing a bunch. So I'm going to get these fans off, I think. Maybe that was the problem. I normally don't have them on, and it was hot up here, so we decided to keep them on so I wasn't sweating up a storm. But clearly they're doing a good job of blowing dust everywhere. So I apologize for that, but I hope you guys enjoyed the topic. Please email us more topics when you think of them, and I look forward to seeing you guys next Tuesday at 3 p.m. Peace.